Professor Kim Ho-min, a leading figure in the chemistry department. He graduated from Korea University and then moved to the US to earn his PhD from MIT. After completing a postdoctoral fellowship, he returned to Korea University and was appointed as a tenured professor. He is recognized as a global authority in the field of batteries, not just in South Korea, and he continues to conduct research and development with the support of the university. Upon meeting him, I found he looked much younger than I had expected. "Hello, Professor. Professor Kim Ho-min smiled as he looked at me. "I heard about you from Professor Kim Young-jun. You must be that Kong Jin who everyone's talking about." "That's correct. Do you like coffee?" "Yes." Professor Kim Ho-min held up a pack of Maxim coffee mix. "What do you think of this?" "Maxim is the best coffee. Just sit for a moment." I cleared some books that were sprawled across the sofa and sat down. Professor Kim Ho-min boiled water in an electric kettle and prepared a cup of coffee mix in a paper cup. "Thank you. Do you know who first created coffee mix?" "That would be Dong Seo Food." "That's right. This is truly an invention of the century." Professor Kim Ho-min pointed to the blackboard. "What do you think is written on the blackboard?" "Ah, I'm from the humanities. I guess that's when the phrase, 'I'm sorry for being artsy,' would be used?" Professor Kim Ho-min smiled upon seeing my expression. "This is a battery chemical formula that I've written down whenever it came to mind. I don't really understand it myself. I just didn't want to erase it. By the way, what do you want to see me about?" "I'd like to hear your thoughts on batteries and electric vehicles." Professor Kim readily replied, "Coffee varieties can be broadly divided into two. Do you know what they are?" I nodded. "Robusta and Arabica." Professor Kim nodded in agreement. Similarly, lithium-ion batteries can also be divided into two main types. I recalled what I had read in papers. NCM and LFP, right? That's right. NCM, commonly known as a ternary battery, is made from nickel, manganese and cobalt compounds as cathode materials. In contrast, LFP utilizes lithium iron phosphate. Do you know what a trade-off means? I nodded again. It's an economic term. The government has to execute the goals of economic growth and price stability. However, when the economy grows, prices rise and stabilizing prices will slow down economic growth. Ultimately, if the two goals cannot coexist, one must be sacrificed or a compromise must be found. We use the term too. Lithium-ion batteries are a perfect example. Increasing capacity decreases safety, and increasing safety means reducing capacity. NCM is the former while LFP is the latter. When the properties of a trade-off conflict and one cannot abandon either side, it must be overcome with technological prowess. It's already hard to understand what he means. Was this what take you felt when I rambled on about economics and management? Do you remember the S26 battery explosion incident? Yes. Professor Kim Ho-min suddenly burst into laughter. Haha, well, of course you know about it. You're famous for making a lot of money off that. As you probably know, the explosion of the S26 battery happened because the separator inside the cell was damaged. The reason was that the capacity was increased excessively in a limited space. As this case shows, increasing capacity while ensuring safety is a very difficult task. As a result, Samsung Electronics subtly reduced battery capacity in smartphones released after the S26 incident. They aimed to prevent similar disasters, even if it meant lowering performance. Most electronic devices use ternary batteries. Electric vehicles are the same. Only China really uses LFP. Japan's Technics and Korea's Samsung SB and CL Chemical all produce NCM. In contrast, Chinese battery companies including BID primarily produce LFP. China is the largest producer and consumer of batteries. Having entered industrialization late, China is a latecomer in the existing automotive market. Therefore, they are determined to gain leadership in the next-generation automotive market. The Chinese government actively promoted the spread of electric vehicles by providing subsidies and various benefits. This was also influenced by the serious air pollution in major Chinese cities like Beijing and Shanghai. People often misunderstand that the Chinese government does not care about air pollution, but in reality, it's a matter that the regime is deeply invested in. Most senior members of the Communist Party and conglomerates live in large cities. If food or drinks are contaminated, they can switch to organic products or imports, but they can't change the air. They also can't carry oxygen tanks every time they go outside. They can't stop factory operations either, so they think increasing eco-friendly cars is a way to at least reduce vehicle emissions. Chinese companies' battery technologies lag behind those of developed countries. Hence, they focused on producing LFP rather than NCM, with government subsidies targeting locally produced LFP, officially citing safety issues, which is why Seosung SB and CL chemical batteries were excluded from subsidy eligibility in China. Currently, Chinese firms are also trending toward NCM. While increasing LFP capacity is impossible, improving the safety of NCM is feasible. I see. I didn't ask why. It was clear I wouldn't understand. Instead, I asked another question. So, what do you think about the future of electric vehicles? Energy is lost at each stage. Theoretically, electric vehicles, EVs, are less efficient than internal combustion engine vehicles, ICEs. ICEs combust fossil fuels to directly drive the engine, while EVs convert fossil fuels into electricity to charge batteries and then use that electricity to power motors. But in the end, EVs prove to be more efficient. This is due to energy efficiency. The energy efficiency of ICEs is about 20%. Only 20% of the energy produced from burning gasoline is used to move the vehicle, with the rest wasted as heat energy. In contrast, EVs achieve an energy efficiency of over 80%. Thus, even with extra steps, EVs consume less energy. Professor Kim Ho-min sipped his coffee and asked, "What was last year's total car sales?" "Just under 90 million units. "And how about EV sales?" "About 750,000 units. That includes not just pure electric vehicles, EVs, but also plug-in hybrids, FAVs." Professor Kim nodded. "That's still less than 1% of total sales. They predict it will surpass 1 million units this year, but it's still negligible. What if all vehicles sold now were EVs? Electricity consumption would skyrocket, so power management would become an issue. That could be addressed by building more power plants or using alternative energy sources. The problem lies in two areas: battery cost and battery efficiency. Could EVs have spread so quickly without smartphones? Smartphones triggered the initial supply and demand for batteries. As smartphones consumed more power than feature phones, their rapid adoption led to a significant increase in battery production, causing prices to drop sharply. Nevertheless, batteries remain expensive enough to require subsidies. Innovating manufacturing processes can reduce fixed costs per unit, lowering processing costs, but as production increases, raw material prices may rise. Just as the proliferation of automobiles heightened oil demand, the rise of EVs has driven up demand for battery materials. In fact, lithium prices have consistently risen. The most concerning issue is cobalt. In a ternary battery, cobalt is an essential material. Half of the world's reserves are located in Congo, where supply stability is affected by civil war and security issues. With speculative demand also contributing, international prices have already more than doubled. The cost proportion has increased as well, from less than 8% to over 20% now. What if we increase the subsidy for 1 million cars to 90 million? Before that, the government would go bankrupt. What happens if 90 million electric cars flock to charging stations? It'll be quite a sight in winter. Long lines are already forming at gas stations. However, fast charging for electric vehicles takes over 30 minutes. In winter, when battery efficiency drops significantly, charging stations will become overcrowded. So what should we do? It's simple. We need to reduce costs, increase capacity, and speed up charging. But isn't that the problem we can't solve? Again, while technology has rapidly advanced, batteries haven't kept pace. The improvements seen are partly due to enhanced power efficiency in electronic components like semiconductors. Professor Kim Ho-min smiled wryly. That's why we're working hard on our winking and laughing. We're trying to minimize the use of expensive cobalt and rare metals while increasing capacity and ensuring safety. Science may not make the impossible possible, but it can make the possible happen. This is not just an issue for electric cars. It's a core technology for the future. Smartphones, laptops, tablets, wearable devices, drones, electric vehicles, implantable medical devices, and more. If we can't solve this problem, technological development in other fields will face limits. Initially, I only had a vague idea, but as we talked, I became convinced. This person is the right fit. Do you have any other questions? Yes. What is it? I put down my empty paper cup. I was thinking of establishing a battery R winking and laughing institute at OTK company, and I'm curious if you'd consider taking the lead as the director. Professor Kim Ho-min, momentarily taken aback, burst into laughter. Haha, are you saying you want to hire me? More accurately, it's to invite you to join us. If I go to the research institute, I'll have to give up my professorship. I assure you that we will provide an even greater level of support, not just for you but for all the researchers working with you. As a tenured professor at Korea University, Professor Kim has guaranteed stability and prestige throughout his life. However, that security is not the case for other researchers. Even master's and doctoral degree holders often struggle with financial issues and job insecurity. If research stops, they become unemployed almost immediately. Great achievements do not come from one person's efforts alone. They need the support of those working beneath them. I decided to start persuading him in earnest. In Korea, both universities and companies expect results within 1 or 2 years. If results are not produced within that time frame, funding gets cut. Professor Kim's research team had produced no results for several years. In fact, rumors about funding being withdrawn were starting to circulate. If you take charge of the research institute, I will ensure you have an environment where you can research freely, whether for 10 years or 20. While I say that, I truly have no intention of waiting that long. Professor Kim would develop next-generation batteries and win the Nobel Prize in chemistry. This implies that he would achieve something remarkably scientific enough to earn such an award. So, when would he achieve such feats and when would he receive the Nobel Prize? I don't think it will take too long. Solving battery issues is a pressing challenge for the industry, and all companies are actively engaging in research and development. Hence, it is highly likely that solutions will emerge soon, and Professor Kim is in the best position to provide those solutions. If someone else solves it first, that person will receive the Nobel Prize. Some might think he's too young to win a Nobel Prize, but in the fields of science and engineering, significant achievements often come at a young age. Einstein discovered the theory of relativity in his 20s, and Stephen Hawking gained worldwide fame as a physicist starting in his 30s. Professor Kim Ho-min scratched his head. Can you really continue to support research and development? Of course. Lately, money had been tight, but fortunately, the success of Lost Fantasy M provided some relief. Even distributing just a portion next quarter could secure tens of millions of dollars in cash. I plan to invest all that money directly into establishing a research institute. Looking at his expression, it seemed I had piqued his interest a bit. It was the right moment to seal the deal. Instead of sweet-talking, I brought up something realistic. If you join me, I promise you'll make a lot of money. His surprise told me my statement was unexpected. Money. As you know, I'm a business major and don't know much about chemistry or battery principles. However, I understand that if we succeed in development, the companies that produce the product will earn a fortune. And those investing in it will also make big bucks. There are countless wealthy entrepreneurs and financiers. But what about the scientists, developers, and researchers who create it? How many of them actually become rich? Researchers affiliated with companies or universities often end up with a promotion or a meager bonus, even after successful developments. Conversely, when they fail, they're treated poorly or even fired. I will give you a 30% stake in the institute. All patents and technologies developed will belong to the institute, along with all resulting profits. Professor Kim looked caught off guard. I never expected to receive such an offer from a student at Korea University. If Thomas Edison hadn't founded General Electric, would he have become rich? Meanwhile, Nikola Tesla, who invented numerous things under Edison, lost all his patents and died in poverty. I looked directly at Professor Kim. Wouldn't it be better to be an Edison than a Tesla? As soon as I stepped outside, I called Senior Sang Yeep. What happened? They said they'd think about it. If they become a full professor at Korea University, they're among the top 1% of professors. Would they really leave that position? I think they would. The higher someone is, the more they tend to avoid risks. Professors enjoy social status, financial stability, and guaranteed prestige. That's why so many strive to become professors. However, Professor Kim Ho-min, whom I met, felt more like a scientist than a typical professor. A scientist would likely be tempted by an offer that allows uninterrupted focus on research and development. But why Professor Kim? There are many others if you look around. He's the most suitable. Who knows? He might succeed in research and later win a Nobel Prize. My comment seemed like a joke and Senior Sang Yi burst out laughing. Haha, wouldn't it be faster for you to win the Nobel Prize in economics? Come on, what would I have to do with a Nobel in economics? Strictly speaking, the Nobel Prize in economics isn't a Nobel Prize. It was established by the Swedish Central Bank in honor of Alfred Nobel, with the selection of winners and prize money handled by the bank, not the Nobel Foundation. Still, it's the most prestigious award in the field of economics and most economists dream of receiving it. Actual recipients are globally renowned scholars like Milton Friedman, Paul Krugman, and Angus Deaton. Of course, one doesn't receive this award merely for making money through smart investments. Significant contributions to economics are required. At least one thing is clear: the rumors are clean. No embezzling research funds or abusing graduate students. Being a great scientist doesn't automatically mean one is a great person. Some professors embezzle research funds or misappropriate grants, exploiting their students for cheap labor or treating them like slaves. In universities, professors hold absolute power, making it difficult for anyone to protest these practices when they occur. Anyway, since academia is what it is, if you happen to annoy your advisor, you might find it hard to establish yourself for life. On top of that, men also have military obligations to deal with. Professor Kim Ho-min is at least clean regarding such issues. He takes good care of his research students and actively helps them with papers and job placements. Nonetheless, the situation for the research students isn't great. There's plenty of work, but their salaries are barely at the minimum living wage. If the university cuts research funding, they'll have to worry about making ends meet immediately. I propose to set up a research institute, hire all of them and give them the best treatment. If Professor Kim Ho-min feels responsible for them, he will have no choice but to accept my proposal. Please start looking for a building for the institute right away. Already? There's no harm in being prepared in advance. Got it. I'll get on it immediately. Sunbae Sang-yeep didn't ask any more questions and hung up. Now all I have to do is wait for a response? Instead of going back to the office, I took a moment to stroll around the campus. Since it was lunchtime, students were gathering in groups and heading to the cafeteria. I saw some upperclassmen and fresh-faced freshmen who still showed signs of being high school students. With the semester just starting, their faces seemed full of expectations and excitement about college life. There was a time when I also had such youthful days. Thinking about that makes me feel strangely old. If I hadn't jumped into this line of work, I would probably still be preparing for a job while attending school, right? That thought gives me a mixed feeling. I slightly long to return to being a student. I wonder what the kids are up to. Since then, I've lost all contact with my peers. It's been so long since I've seen Min-young and Kai and Jill. For now, I headed toward the business administration building. I wonder if Yuri came to school today. I was about to contact someone when suddenly my phone rang. To my surprise, it was Yuri. Yuri. Yuri spoke hurriedly. Senpai, did you come to school? Yeah. How did you know? Where are you now? I'm on my way to the business school building. I'm almost there. At that, Yuri shouted. You can't come. Why not? Since the rumor spread that you're here, all classes have been suspended and students are gathering here. If you come, you won't be able to get away. I was taken aback by what she said. What? I had only told Professor Kim Young-jun, thinking it wouldn't cause any complicated issues. I couldn't believe the department head would spread rumors. Who spread the rumor? It was Jaime. Lee Jaime. Why is she involved in this? She said she saw you coming out after meeting the department head. Honestly, she's of no help in my life whatsoever. I quickly ducked my head and turned my body. I needed to get out of this situation fast. At that moment, someone grabbed my arm. Startled, I turned to see Yuri standing there with her phone in hand. Yuri smiled brightly and said, "There you are, senpai." Ugh. You startled me. It's been a while. She had her blonde hair in a ponytail, wearing a white turtleneck and a tiered skirt that came to her knees. She still looked cute and lively. Yuri playfully scolded me. Why didn't you let me know you were coming to school? I was actually about to contact you when my phone rang. Really? The last time we met she was a first-year student and now she had become a third year. Time certainly flies. At that moment a group of students passed by us. What's going on? Jin Hukong is at school. Really? The Jin Hukong from the business department. Yeah. The CEO of Otaku Company. Don't you mean OTK Company? Toei. Let's go check it out. Is my popularity at this level? Anyone would think a Hollywood star had arrived. In truth, it was more about curiosity than popularity. People probably just wanted to see what Kong Jinhoo looked like. Yuri grabbed my hand and pulled me along. If we get caught, it'll be a big problem. Let's hurry and escape. We quickly made our way to the parking lot. I climbed into the driver's seat, and Yuri naturally got into the passenger seat. So, we're going straight to the company, right? Huh. You said you'd show me around the company before. Did I say that? What about your classes? They're all finished. Really? Yuri subtly avoided my gaze. Of course. I felt like she was skipping out on class. All right, driver Kong. Let's get going. Got it. I started the car. During the drive to the company, Yuri shared various stories about school. Min Young Sr. got a job at a defense company. Kyunjil Sr. went to Katusa. I guess both of them will have a tough time for a while. But speaking as someone who's been discharged as a sergeant, it's 100 times better than just going to the military. Do you know Jaime Sr. talks a lot about you to the juniors? The freshmen all think there was something going on between the two of you. Can't this be considered defamation due to false rumor spreading? She hasn't graduated yet? She has a lot of credit issues, so she has to stay until this year. She's confident she'll get into OTK Company after graduation. What's that about? Oh. Sienna Sr. graduated and got a job at GH Construction. Really? From the looks of it, they seem to still be seeing each other well. I want to graduate and get a job quickly too. If things go well, I think I can graduate early after just attending until next semester. I was quite surprised by that. Guess you've managed your grades surprisingly well. Surprisingly? There's no student who works as hard as I do. Please take good care of me when I apply for jobs later, Sue. Is she really thinking of coming to OTK Company? Yuri casually added, Dad and Uncle Childing said they wanted to have a drink with you. That would be an honor. Can I join too? Isn't it fine if it's not a business place? Hee, since you allowed it, I guess I should talk to Dad. But what brings you to school? I just wanted to see the department head for the first time in a while. Since she would find out later anyway, I spoke frankly. I'm thinking of establishing a battery research institute and trying to bring a professor from the chemistry department as the head of the institute. Oh, so that's why you're here to persuade them in person? Something like that. You're taking on quite a lot, acquiring a car company, setting up a battery factory, and now a research institute. Isn't that a bit too much? You're right about that. At first I only invested in Keros, but somehow I've been expanding my reach throughout the automotive industry. I wonder what kind of outcome this will yield. But with basic science research, doesn't it take quite a while to commercialize it? Technology or patents don't generate money on their own. To commercialize them, countless experiments and trials are necessary. Sometimes there are failures in this process, or better technologies may emerge in the meantime. I'm investing with a long-term perspective. If it happens quickly, great. If it takes longer, well, I'd still be able to get research results worth a Nobel Prize in chemistry. There's no risk in investing. I think the government has decided to push for hydrogen cars. Thanks to a direct directive from the president, the hydrogen car development plan is progressing steadily. Local governments have already started selecting sites for charging stations, and the authorities signed a contract to purchase 300 hydrogen cars. Currently, the only hydrogen car released in Korea is the Unsung Motors Potent HY, so naturally Potent HY was the target. As hydrogen cars begin to surge as future vehicles, related stocks have all shown an upward trend. Unsung Motor, expected to benefit the most, saw its stock price rise by about 3%. In contrast, electric vehicle stocks are experiencing weakness, and Samsung SB's stock price has dropped below 300,000 won again. If hydrogen cars become the dominant trend like this, companies that invested in electric vehicles will suffer huge losses. My losses will be significant too. As I was driving, Yuri was staring at my face from the side. What's wrong? Yuri smiled and replied, nothing. It was quick to get to the company. After parking, I headed straight to the top floor. Yuri was admiring the CEO's office. Wow. You can see Tehran Street all at once. Senior, you're working in such a nice place. Isn't your father's office similar? The RCK Brothers building is also in Gangnam and about the same size. Oh, it's not quite like this. Is Taekyu Appa working here with you? The COO's office is on a lower floor. The layout is almost identical. So he's working downstairs now? Well, he have been busy these days, preparing to establish an esports team. Let's go. I'll show you around some other places. I took Yuri around, showing her various parts of the company. Then we ran into Senior Ji Hong near the PR department. Senior Ji Hong looked surprised and asked, "Oh, Shin Yuri." Yuri bowed her head in greeting. Hello, Senior. What brings you here?" I chimed in to explain for her. She wanted to take a tour of the company. Senior Ji Hong nodded with a smile. I see. Have a great time. What did that mean? After wrapping up the tour, I asked Yuri, "Have you not eaten lunch yet?" "Yeah. Let's go. I'll buy you something delicious." "Hey. I'm hungry, so let's hurry." As we stepped outside the building, I spotted Taekyu and Ellie walking in together. "Hey Jinho. How was school?" Ellie waved happily at me, then looked at Yuri beside me. "Who is this?" I stammered a bit and replied, This is a junior from school." "Oh really?" Ellie greeted her warmly. "Nice to meet you, I'm Ellie Kim." Yuri bowed her head slightly. "Hello, I'm Shin Yuri." The two, who had been smiling and greeting each other, suddenly paused. It seemed they were recalling something from each other's names. "Isn't she the foreign student who came to school with Jinhoo during the break? The junior who followed you home?" A brief moment of silence passed, and then Taekyu placed his hand on my shoulder and spoke in a low voice. "I knew a day like this would come, my friend." We all entered a Japanese restaurant for lunch. I briefly pondered where to sit, but fortunately Taekyu plopped down right next to me. Naturally, Ellie and Yuri sat side by side. Seeing the two together highlighted their charms distinctly. Ellie had a boyish look with her brown short hair, while Yuri radiated a cute vibe with her long blonde ponytail. The atmosphere felt a bit awkward somehow. After ordering my meal, I casually stood up. "I'm going to the bathroom for a moment." While washing my hands in the restroom, I realized something important. Could it be that I was unknowingly caught in a love triangle between the two? What should I do now? As I was thinking, I heard a voice behind me. "So hurry up and decide to confess." When I looked in the mirror, Taekyu was standing behind me. "What's the problem?" At his question, I replied defensively. "Well, I'm not in a good situation to date anyone right now. Work is really busy." I had numerous tasks on my plate and none were resolved. The pile of work was immense, and there was no sign of a solution to the issues with Eun Sung and Park Si-hyung. In this situation, could I really have a proper relationship? Taekyu waved his fingers and said, "That's just an excuse. Do you think others are dating because they have nothing to do? Is that so? After all, who in the world isn't busy? There's no relationship that doesn't hurt anyone. Just follow your heart." "That's true, but..." I nodded, then hesitated. Why am I getting relationship advice from someone who's never dated? What do you know about dating? Taekyu patted my shoulder and said, "Do you think I haven't encountered a few dating sims?" So he learned about romance from games. By the way, him being here meant only Ellie and Yuri were left. Just the two of them made me a bit worried. What if they feel awkward with each other? I hurried back to my seat. However, contrary to my expectations, they were engaged in a warm conversation. "So, you worked in Hong Kong and then came to Korea?" "Yes. I followed Jessica when the Korean branch was established." "Wow. I've dreamed of working in Hong Kong for a while now. It's the financial hub of Asia, right? Have you been to Hong Kong?" "I went a few times with my parents." Ellie turned to me and said, "Why did you take so long? Hurry up and eat." "Oh right." During the meal, the mood was cheerful. Yuri asked various questions about the Golden Gate and Ellie kindly answered. When the topic of Hyunju came up, Yuri couldn't hide her surprise. "Being the first female branch manager is really impressive," Taekyu remarked. "My sister is doing really well. How can I achieve that?" "If you work 20 hours a day for about 10 years, you'll get there." We finished our meal and stepped outside. Ellie said, Let's go have some coffee. Shall we? At that moment my phone rang. The caller was Chairman Im Jin-young. If you're not busy, how about a drink? From his voice, it didn't sound like a casual invitation for drinks. Did he have something to discuss? Understood. I'll send you the address. Ending the call, I turned to Ellie and said, I'm sorry but something came up and I have to go. Ellie smiled and nodded. It's okay, you should go. We'll have our coffee together. When I arrived at the designated location, the personal assistant was standing by the parking lot. The chairman is on the second basement level. Understood. I entrusted him with my car and took the elevator down. In the dimly lit spacious bar, a man was sitting alone, sipping his drink. As I approached, Chairman Im Jin-young turned his head. Hello, senior. Thank you for coming, junior. What's the matter? Nothing much. It's tedious drinking alone. There was no one else in the bar besides Chairman Im. I couldn't see any bartenders, staff or assistants. On the table were a bottle of liquor and 2 glasses. Have you been drinking alone the whole time? My younger brother just left a moment ago. Your brother, Mr. Im Sung-young? Yes. I could roughly guess why they met. He probably apologized for the foolishness of trying to stand up to his older brother and pleaded for leniency. So what happened? Chairman Im sipped his drink and said, as an older brother I accepted it. I have to understand that my younger brother made a brief mistake. And as the group chairman? In response to my question he simply smiled faintly. It's a lonely position to be a chairman. Chairman Im pointed at me with his finger. Isn't it the same for you? I have take you with me. That's nice. Having someone to drink with must be comforting. I think so too. I could sense his genuine envy in his tone. Do you enjoy drinking? I can drink but I don't indulge in it. Chairman Im Jin-young extended his glass toward me and poured the liquor. There's a Scottish proverb. There is no bad whiskey in the world. There are only good whiskies and better whiskies. That's a good proverb. But no matter how good the whiskey, if you drink it with someone you don't connect with, it can feel worse than cheap vodka. We sat side by side drinking. There were no appetizers. It wasn't likely that he couldn't afford them. It seemed he just wasn't the type to eat while drinking. In any case, I had just eaten and was already full. Chairman Im brought up the main topic. President Park Si-hyung seems to have drawn his sword quite firmly. I nodded. From what you're saying, it sounds like that sword is aimed at me. He spun the empty glass with his finger. If Ronald had taken control of Washington, Park Si-hyung would probably be holding his breath. But right now Ronald is too busy handling his own affairs. Despite trailing by over 3 million votes, Ronald managed to secure the White House, but he failed to gain control of Congress. Both the House and Senate are firmly with the Democratic Party. It would be one thing if public opinion leaned in his favor, but currently Ronald's approval rating is even lower than that of the Republican Party. Every party has its factions, both mainstream and fringe. Diane, a political scion who has been committed to the Democratic Party for generations, naturally belonged to the mainstream of her party. On the other hand, Ronald, a political newcomer, was classified as a thorough outsider within the Republican Party. His policies diverged significantly from traditional Republican values. There was substantial backlash even within the Republican Party against Ronald's aggressive policy push. His ambitious reforms, including immigration law changes, healthcare reform, trade agreements, and the construction of a border wall with Mexico, faced numerous obstacles. To advance policies, one must continually persuade and compromise with the party, the National Assembly, and the media. But who would Ronald appeal to for support? Instead of persuasion, he hurled insults and mockery at his opponents, which only intensified the backlash. The National Assembly was a mixed bag. His approval ratings plummeted, and even senior party members turned their backs on him. He found himself in a dire situation. What do you think President Park's weakness is? Isn't it PAS? Chairman Im Jin-young nodded. That is definitely critical. But would exposing it be enough to bring down the president? Let's talk about the primary. At that time, the atmosphere in the Korean Party primary was such that just passing meant almost automatically becoming president. I nodded in agreement. That's how it turned out. The presidential election was a decisive victory. Park Si-hyung became the first to win a majority vote after direct elections were enacted. Consequently, the exchanges during the primary were fierce. PIS was initially revealed by an opponent back then. Aside from that, there were issues related to collusion with large corporations, properties under false names, slush funds, embezzlement and more. There was no shortage of problems. However, none of these matters proved to be obstacles to his becoming president. Did the public truly not know about Park Si-hyung's corruption? Or did they turn a blind eye despite knowing? Although the prosecution found him not guilty of various charges, not many truly believe Park Si-hyung is entirely innocent. Despite this, the public ultimately chose Park Si-hyung. Is it that they prefer an outstanding leader with some flaws over an honest but incompetent one? People only see what they want to see. The same goes for the revelations about his ties with PAS. The scandals that have emerged are far too many to count. Some, like the National Intelligence Service's illegal surveillance and the military's election meddling, could have shaken the regime. However, most cases haven't even been investigated, and when they are, the outcomes are conveniently dismissed as individual misconduct. President Park Si-hyung never forgets a grudge. You know what he did during the general elections right after he was elected. After a fierce primary, Park Si-hyung showed a willingness to embrace the opposition. He needed to secure as broad a support base as possible to become president. But once elected, those factions were no longer needed. The general election was held less than a year after the presidential election. Support ratings for both the president and the party were soaring, making it easy to secure nominations for parliamentary seats. During this time, Park Si-hyung purged opposition lawmakers by excluding them from nominations. Even senior members of the party were not spared. They were either denied nominations or pushed into difficult constituencies under the guise of strategic selections. The only alternative for them was to leave the party and run as independents. It was so severe that the term nomination massacre arose. In contrast, his supporters were meticulously placed in key positions. Since then, the Korean People's Party has essentially taken on the characteristics of a personal party for Park Si-hyung. After coming to power, Park Si-hyung focused on two major tasks. One was to control the so-called four major investigatory agencies: the police, prosecution, National Intelligence Service, and National Tax Service. The other was to seize control of the media. He replaced all the heads of the national broadcasters, including the public broadcaster, with his affiliates and manipulated conservative media through control of cable channel allocations. In the early days of his administration, media outlets that criticized government missteps fell silent and became loyal mouthpieces for the regime. With the rise of internet media and social networks, it's impossible to hide all facts. However, mainstream media can silence itself or voice different opinions, effectively rewriting events and blurring the line between truth and falsehood. The judiciary and media are not fulfilling their roles, and various illegal activities, corruption, and government blunders have all been buried. President Park Si-hyung has maintained high approval ratings even until the end of his term. During the U.S. presidential election, many companies sided with the Democrats, and some CEOs openly criticized Ronald. CNN and NBC openly debated with him. What would happen to businesses and media in Korea if they did the same? Well, it wouldn't be good for them. Korea is very different from the U.S. In a situation where political power manipulates the market, even conglomerates can't do business if they fall out of favor with the politicians. Isn't that a sign of weakness? Chairman Im Jin-yong acknowledged this candidly. That's true. Hence, large corporations have donated large sums under the pretext of political funds. How much do you think they've given to Park Si-hyung and his close aides? Isn't accepting bribes grounds for impeachment? Im Jin-yong chuckled softly. Both the bribed and the bribers are at fault. So it seems everyone involved is forced to stay silent. The Samsung Group must have contributed quite a bit as well, especially since they are the top in the industry. I suddenly realized how much unchecked power the president holds in Korea. The only consolation is that the term is limited to 5 years. Will the regime change in the next election? Unless something remarkable happens, the successor nominated by President Park Si-hyung will likely win. Park Si-hyung will certainly not relinquish power easily. Perhaps he will seek to exercise influence even after retiring. So what should we do? Chairman Im Jin-yong adjusted his glasses and spoke. There's nothing to gain by fighting the regime. It would be wise to reconcile. If necessary, I can help facilitate that. Reconcile. Can I solve the issue just by bowing my head and paying off like other conglomerates? OTK company is based in the US, so if problems arise, we can simply relocate there. However, K company is a Korean entity, and all the investors are also in Korea. Do I really have to go this far just because I'm doing business in Korea? After a moment of thought, I shook my head. I'm not interested in that. They made the first move. Because of it, I've been through a lot. Even Take-You ended up in a terrible situation. This isn't going to end like this. I nodded. That's good to hear. I had no intention of letting it end like this either. What has been done to me must be repaid several times over. It seemed that Chairman Im Jin-young was slightly surprised, perhaps not expecting me to stand firmly against the regime. There had been opportunities for reconciliation before. If we had quietly overlooked the civilian surveillance and illegal investigations by the prosecution during the press conference, we wouldn't be so antagonistic towards each other now. I'm not doing this out of mere pride or without thought. In the worst-case scenario, I'm even considering splitting K company from a connected entity into an independent corporation. An OTK company may withdraw from Korea. Take-You and I would naturalize in the US. Of course, I wish to avoid reaching that point. Chairman Im poured the drink in his glass into his mouth. Let's talk business now. Yes. The Samsung Group has made several mistakes over the years. Two of those mistakes stand out. I think I know one of them. It's Android, right? He nodded. Paul Cates, who created the smartphone OS Android, approached Samsung Electronics in its early development to propose an acquisition, but Samsung refused. By that time they were already developing their OS. As everyone knows, Android was later acquired by Google and, together with Apple's iOS, split the smartphone OS market. The acquisition price by Google is said to be $60 million, but Android has reportedly generated over $30 billion since then. It's uncertain whether it would have turned out the same had Samsung acquired it, but it's undeniable that they missed a great opportunity. The other one is Tesla. The founder, Alan Eberhart, came to Samsung SB early on to request a bulk supply of 18,650 batteries. 18650 refers to a battery with a diameter of 18 mm and a height of 65 mm, commonly used in phones and laptops. The biggest advantage of mass production is that the prices are low. Electric vehicles are expensive due to battery costs. Alan conceived the idea of connecting thousands of 18,650 batteries, generic small batteries instead of large automotive batteries, in parallel to lower costs. While it's true that he's a genius, such an idea is something anyone could come up with. However, turning an idea into reality is not something just anyone can achieve. It's not just about connecting the batteries. You also need to control performance uniformly and manage heat. Many considered it an impossible task, but Alan was confident in his independent technology to solve those problems. Samsung SB rejected that request. At that time, Tesla was a company that couldn't even make one car. Alan was confident that if they built it, he would buy as many as they could, but he couldn't afford the risk for a nascent startup. Ultimately, Alan sought out Japanese Technics and signed an exclusive contract. The electric vehicle released by Tesla was deemed revolutionary, selling like hotcakes, which allowed Technics, previously on the brink of failure, to stage a comeback. Currently, it is Samsung SB that is reaching out to Tesla, but Tesla has declared that it will only accept exclusive supplies from Technics. From Samsung SB's perspective, it missed a golden opportunity to become a dominant player in the battery market. Things had gone well back then, perhaps there would have been no need for collaboration with me? Chairman Im Jin-young poured more liquor into his glass. Samsung Group has grown thanks to government support. It's the same for all large corporations. In developing countries, resources are limited, so promising companies receive concentrated support. It's not an exaggeration to say that conglomerates in Korea have grown with taxpayers' money. They have received favorable funding, had their domestic markets protected, and when crises arose, public funds were injected to save them. The Korean market is small. Relying solely on the domestic market will lead to decline. That's why my grandfather and father always said we must go global. They believed that earning foreign currency as we grew with the nation's support is a form of patriotism. That's true. That's the essence of patriotism. The Samsung Group earns hundreds of billions of dollars from abroad each year, playing a crucial role in supporting the Korean economy. Of course, if Samsung Electronics had not existed, another company might have filled that gap. However, just because a company worth 300 trillion won disappears doesn't mean 10 companies worth 30 trillion won will spring up in its place. This is evident from observing Japanese electronics firms. While the market capitalizations of companies like Sony and Toshiba have decreased, new companies have not emerged. Instead, markets have been taken by foreign firms like Samsung Electronics and Enful. Samsung Electronics was able to leap to a global status thanks to semiconductors and smartphones. The issue now lies ahead. If we fail to create new growth engines, we could fall behind at any time. Is that growth engine in the automotive industry? Chairman Im Jin-young nodded. What do you think about hydrogen vehicles? What's your opinion, senior? There are differing views even among our experts. Some believe the electric vehicle era won't last long and will transition to hydrogen, while others think both electric and hydrogen vehicles will coexist. So, you're suggesting that hydrogen vehicles will occupy a certain segment? Yes, they have several advantages over electric vehicles. If we can reduce prices through technological development and mass production, it won't be impossible to displace electric cars. Conversely, if electric vehicles can solve the issues with secondary batteries, they could push hydrogen vehicles aside and seal their fate. Upon my words, Chairman Im Jin-young's eyes sparkled. Is that possible? I spoke with conviction. It will definitely happen. 3 days later, Professor Kim Ho-min came directly to OTK Company. After receiving a call from the reception desk, I quickly made my way to the lobby. If you had told me, I could have come to you. It's fine. Today happens to be a day without lectures anyway. I guided him to the CEO's office. Professor Kim Ho-min scratched his head and said, I've been thinking for a few days. I also talked with Professor Kim Young-jun. What did he say? He strongly recommended it as a great opportunity. Just as I thought, our department head is the best. I should express my gratitude later. Can you keep all the promises we talked about? That you won't interfere at all with the development direction and that you'll treat the researchers well. Hearing this, it seemed he was almost decided. I nodded. Of course. You may not know, but being a researcher is not an easy job. There's a lot of work, but the pay is low and there's not much guarantee of success later on. I promise to provide the best treatment for both you and the researchers. Professor Kim Ho-min looked at me and asked, Can you really make me wealthy? It's not just about money. I want to show our people that even with hard work in research and development, they can succeed far beyond just being entrepreneurs or investors. Yes. You will be their role model. Professor Kim Ho-min extended his hand. All right. Then I look forward to working with you, CO. I took his hand. I look forward to working with you as well, Director of the Research Institute. I met with Hyunju Nuna, just the two of us, after a long time. I brought coffee. Thank you. She still looked tired. Your necklace and earrings suit you well. Hyunju Nuna chuckled at my comment. Thanks for the gift. Shouldn't I do something for you too? I have plenty of money, so I'll just take your goodwill. Hyunju Nuna lit a cigarette. I sat down and sipped my coffee. How's work going? Always busy. I heard Golden Gate is doing really well lately. Golden Gate, which entered the Korean market, has begun to actively expand its operations. They reached out into stocks, bonds, funds, futures and options, asset management, corporate loans and project financing. The most distinct feature compared to domestic securities firms is their overseas funds. Since last year, they launched several funds investing in the ASEAN market, and their operational capabilities built in the global market have produced incredible returns. Of course, it's also thanks to the recovery of the world economy. Once the profitability was made known, funds began pouring into the investments. Domestic securities firms, which had been operating as if swimming in shallow waters, all began to express their concerns. Still, several firms quickly responded by expanding their operations and launching new products. For a long time, foreign investment banks had struggled to gain a foothold in Korea. The reason Golden Gate was able to establish itself in a relatively short time is largely due to the efforts of Hyunju Nuna, the branch manager. How about you guys? I updated her on our progress. We've recruited a head of the research center and we're in the process of setting it up as planned. I think the funds will come from the OTK Games dividends next quarter. Hyunju Nuna pushed her glass aside and asked. I've been curious for a while. Is there a reason you're rushing things like this? There's a proper order to work. First, you acquire the car company, then expand the factory based on sales, and after that you invest in new research and development. However, I'm simultaneously working on the acquisition, technology development, factory construction, a battery joint venture, and the establishment of a battery research institute. If everything proceeds as planned, that's great, but if things go wrong, it could all collapse one after another. I'm not unaware of the risks. If I hadn't had foresight, I wouldn't be taking on so much at once. But why? Because the future is approaching faster than expected. The current industry is rapidly changing in every aspect. Sharing economy, big data, artificial intelligence, mobile payments, etc. In China, street vendors accept payments through Alipay instead of cards or cash. So much so that it's become nearly impossible to conduct commerce without it, leading locations like Myeongdong and duty-free shops, where many Chinese tourists visit, to start accepting it. Just a few years ago, blockchain technology was almost unheard of, yet it's now on the rise, and the prices of various cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin, soar daily. In the US, calling an Uber instead of hailing a taxi has become the norm, and in China, data chushing established by Alazini and WeChat has taken that spot. Compared to this, Korea is almost like the Galapagos Islands. All sorts of regulations are blocking innovation. Self-driving cars and electric vehicles will change the world. That time isn't far off. Hyunju crushed her cigarette into the ashtray. What kind of future are you envisioning? I smiled. To be honest, I don't know either. The information I have is fragmented and limited. They're like individual points. But connecting those points forms lines, and connecting lines creates areas. Maybe we can figure out what kind of picture this paints? But why did you call me here? Hyunju leaned back on the sofa and sipped her coffee. I've heard that the Financial Supervisory Service will be investigating transactions between Golden Gate and OTK Company. The Financial Supervisory Service? If the Fair Trade Commission is the Grim Reaper for corporations, the Financial Supervisory Service is the Grim Reaper for financial companies. What's the reason? They're going to look into whether any preferences were given during the transaction process and if there were any illegal activities. If they find issues, they'll impose penalties. Is it the Financial Supervisory Service's turn after the National Intelligence Service, the Prosecutor's Office, and the National Tax Service? Who knows what'll come next? They might even launch another tax audit. As long as Ronald is around, it's impossible to pull off nonsensical actions like before. Yet it's also true that if they conduct a legal investigation, there's no way to stop it. I met Chairman Im Jin-yong before. I shared the conversation I had with him, and Hyunju nodded. That's true. At least Park Si-hyung seemed more capable than other politicians. If everyone can improve the economy and create a prosperous country, I thought I could overlook a few personal flaws. Park Si-hyung championed business-friendly policies under the belief that if companies thrived, citizens would prosper. Thanks to various privileges, large companies grew significantly. However, the situation for small and medium-sized enterprises worsened, with lower wage increases leading to stagnant real incomes. It's only natural to think that most manufacturing jobs are handled by small businesses. How can the economy for ordinary citizens improve when they are struggling? Still, people continued to support Park Si-hyung. Even with so many scandals coming to light. If it were any other president, they would have been impeached by now. That's why a person's image matters so much. A politician with a clean image suffers significantly from even minor scandals. In the case of Park Si-hyung, it's the opposite. He has flaws but is seen as capable, so when corruption scandals arise, there's a general attitude of, well, that's expected. If evidence were found and the relationship with PAS were exposed, could it really be a fatal blow? Isn't there any other good way? At that moment, a hologram appeared before me. What are you staring at blankly? Snapping back to reality at the sound of the voice, I saw Hyunju Nuna sipping her coffee. The hologram that had just been before me had disappeared. I was thinking about whether there might be a good way. I asked casually, do you know about Hozong Savings Bank? Hyunju Nuna chuckled. Is that what you came up with? Yes. Well, it's the savings bank run by Park Si-hyung's in-laws. I nodded as if I knew the answer. Right. So that's why it suddenly came to mind. Hyunju Nuna explained. The current chairman of Hozong Savings Bank is Min Jongju, and the CEO is Min Songju. Min Songju's son Min Jiajin is Park Si-hyung's son-in-law. Can I get some documents on that? Hyunju Nuna set down her coffee. It's true that Hozong Savings Bank received various preferential treatments. It grew significantly when Park Si-hyung provided funding for project financing and private investments during his time as Gyeonggi Province governor. Its asset size jumped from 10th to 2nd in the industry, and the number of branches increased several times. I recalled the memory. There were controversies over the preferential treatments. That issue had been audited several times, so bringing it up again wouldn't be very useful. You know, in this government that level of corruption wouldn't even register. Unlike Hyunju Nuna's perspective, I wasn't interested in digging into preferential treatment issues. But I couldn't suddenly claim that the bank would go bankrupt either. I'll take a look for anything else. Hyunju Nuna took a drag of her cigarette and nodded. Got it. I'll send it to you by email. After finishing the conversation, I returned to the OTK company building. As I entered the CEO's office, Taekyu was sitting on the sofa. Did you meet with my Nuna well? That's not what's important right now. Then what is? I told him about what had just happened. The bankruptcy of Hozong Savings Bank? How did you see that? That's what we need to figure out from here on. Opening my inbox, I found an email from Nuna had arrived. I printed out all the materials. Like most savings banks, it's an unlisted company and controlled by the owner's family. The asset size is 5 trillion won with capital of 2.6 trillion won, making it the second largest after IBS Savings Bank. A regular bank and a savings bank are different, right? Yeah, they are. Though their activities and names may seem similar and cause confusion, strictly speaking, savings banks are not banks. Commercial banks belong to the first financial sector, while savings banks fall under the second financial sector. Additionally, commercial banks are heavily regulated under the Banking Act and are supervised by the Bank of Korea, whereas savings banks follow the Mutual Savings Bank Act, with various conditions being more lenient compared to banks. The original name was Mutual Credit Cooperative, but it was changed to allow the use of savings bank in the law. Why was it changed? To make it look similar to banks. In fact, many people confuse the two. Hozong Savings Bank, which started as a local savings bank, has grown alongside Park Si-hyung. It has participated in significant project financing and private sector investments, yielding large profits. The biggest advantage is simply the fact that they are related through marriage to Park Si-hyung. The most important aspect of a savings bank is stability. A savings bank with a presidential son-in-law appears much more stable compared to other savings banks, allowing them to attract many customers. I looked through the materials diligently but couldn't find any significant issues. In situations like this, I should seek expert help, right? I called team leader Seo Sang-won. Moments later, a man in his 40s dressed in a suit walked in. I heard you were looking for something. Do you know about Hozong Savings Bank? Team leader Seo nodded. I've heard the name. I handed him the documents I was holding. Please take a look here and check the financial status. He was known for analyzing the financial accounting of companies targeted for mergers and acquisitions and deriving appropriate acquisition prices from his time at Redstone. Team leader Seo sat down and reviewed the documents he received. It wasn't until a considerable amount of time had passed that he spoke. I'll need to analyze a bit more, but it doesn't look problematic. The capital is solid and the BIS ratio is normal. Is the reserve ratio okay? That's fine as well. The reason for depositing hard-earned money in a bank is to earn interest. Just because a bank receives 100 million won and stores it in a vault doesn't mean interest will accumulate automatically. The bank loans out the deposits it receives to those in need, and from the interest on those loans, it pays interest to the depositors. The difference between loan interest and deposit interest, known as the interest margin, is the bank's profit. However, if the bank lends out all the deposited money, it might not be able to provide funds when a customer suddenly wants to withdraw their deposit. To prepare for such situations, the law mandates that a certain portion of customer deposits must be kept in the central bank, which is referred to as the reserve requirement. Is that so? Is it not yet time for bankruptcy? As I was thinking this, team leader Seo Sang-won paused his hand that was handing over the materials. I notice one strange point. What is it? The deposit interest rate is 0.3% higher than other savings banks. We are currently in an era of low interest rates. Banks are engaged in a game of observation, deciding whether to offer 0.1% more or less. Though 0.3% may seem insignificant, if we assume the average rate is 3%, it's like actually offering an additional 10%. Is there a reason to offer more interest? Please look into Hozong Savings Bank. Investigate discreetly so it doesn't get out that we're checking into it. Without asking for a reason, team leader CEO nodded. Understood. 3 days later, team leader CEO Sang-won returned to the CEO's office. Upon analysis, there are no issues. In fact, it's robust and stable. Yet from his tone, it was clear he had sensed something amiss. But they've established over 100 special-purpose corporations and lent out large amounts, which raises some suspicion. Some of these corporations are suspected to be paper companies, and it's unclear how the loan funds are being used. Are you suggesting they might be non-performing loans? It's not definite. For now, the interest payments are being received regularly. No matter how well the interest is paid, it's useless if the principal can't be recovered. Team leader CEO nodded in agreement. Additionally, there's one more concerning matter unrelated to this. What is it? Since last month, they've been sequentially issuing 2.8 trillion won worth of subordinated bonds with a 3-year maturity, and these are being sold to general customers at various branches. It's common for companies to issue bonds. In South Korea, to protect depositors, the Korea Deposit Insurance Corporation guarantees up to 50 million won. Even if the bank fails and all money is lost, depositors can get their 50 million back without a doubt. On the other hand, while bonds offer higher interest than deposits, they are not insured. In the event of bankruptcy, no one guarantees payment. As a result, as the risk of default increases, bonds are traded at rock-bottom prices. Moreover, subordinated bonds, as the name suggests, have the lowest priority in repayment. If Hozong Savings Bank truly goes bankrupt, those who purchase subordinated bonds would receive nothing. I was incredulous and asked, most people probably don't even know what subordinated bonds are. It seems the employees are enticing customers by saying they offer double the interest compared to deposits. The customers of savings banks are mostly ordinary citizens, with a significant number of elderly individuals among them. As a result, when employees recommend something as good, many customers tend to trust it and sign up. As long as the bank remains stable until maturity, there aren't any issues. It would indeed be favorable if they get more interest than the deposits. However, I felt something was off. If their financial status is okay, why are they issuing subordinated bonds? If they are going to sell to customers anyway, wouldn't it be more beneficial to sell deposit products? Is there really a need to sell bonds that offer higher interest? Banks use the money they receive from deposits to provide loans. Conversely, to return the deposited money, they must recover those loans. But what if the loans aren't being recovered properly? Isn't it possible they are selling bonds to return deposits or trying to convert deposits into bonds? Deposits can be withdrawn at any time, while bonds cannot be redeemed before maturity. The only way for a buyer to recover their money before maturity is to sell the bond to someone else. Since banks have no obligation to return money until maturity, they could buy themselves 3 years. What do you think? Team leader CEO Sang-won spoke carefully. It seems like creative accounting. I nodded. I had a vague suspicion. Having seen predictions of bankruptcy, if there's no issue in the financial statements, it is highly likely that there is creative accounting involved. How large do you think the losses are? It's hard to tell from just the data. Feel free to provide an estimate even if it's not accurate. After a moment of thought, CEO Sang-won mentioned an amount. At least several hundred billion. What if it's more? It could exceed 2 trillion. I was at a loss for words. Everything in a corporation is represented by numbers on paper. Moreover, corporate accounting serves as the foundation for all business activities, including wages, investments, management evaluations, taxes, and forecasts. Therefore, manipulating accounting data is strictly prohibited by law, and external audits are conducted to prevent unforeseen issues. Just by adjusting a few numbers, deficiencies can be hidden, and the temptation for creative accounting is strong since it can inflate revenue and profits. Perhaps due to this, despite the lessons from history, significant scandals seem to occur every few years. The Enron scandal in 2007 is a notable example, and the most recent issue emerged with Toshiba, which had concealed losses for years through creative accounting. When the truth came out, it was revealed that they had over 5 trillion won in losses, leading them to sell their profitable semiconductor division to cover the gaps. The most massive case of creative accounting in South Korea's history involves Daewoo Group. The scale of the accounting fraud revealed at that time was 40 trillion won, marking it as the largest since the founding of the nation. Taekyu asked, "So how big is the deficit?" "Well, in any case, it's enough to lead to bankruptcy." "That seems likely." While the exact scale of the deficit is uncertain, the fact that bankruptcy is imminent is clear. If it's around hundreds of billions, they might manage to pull through this time. If it's slightly more, they could receive support for recovery. However, if it exceeds 1 trillion, bankruptcy cannot be avoided. Fortunately, it's not a major bank, it's a local savings bank. The country's economy shouldn't wobble just because a savings bank goes under. Do you know about this? I know there's a problem, but I didn't expect it to reach this level. If he had known, he would have taken measures sooner. If this blows up, won't the president be in big trouble? Yes, it would be a big deal. This isn't just anyone's affair. It's a savings bank run by his in-laws. I'm not sure how relevant it is, but there's no way to avoid responsibility. But isn't 1 or 2 trillion not that large an amount? Compared to the money they've siphoned off, it's just a drop in the bucket. In absolute terms, yes. But this is all ordinary people's money. The loss of several trillion by Samsung Electronics due to the L6 explosion and ordinary people losing 2 trillion are completely different matters. Most customers of the savings bank are not corporations or wealthy asset holders. They are everyday citizens. Something goes wrong, the local economy will be devastated and ordinary people will suffer. Shouldn't we report this to the Financial Supervisory Service? They're in on it too. If the Financial Supervisory Service had done its job properly, would things have turned out like this? The heads of the Financial Supervisory Service and the Board of Audit and Inspection are all close aides of the president. There are likely several politicians involved with Hozong Savings Bank as well. There's less than a year left in the president's term. Even if they recognize the severity of the problem, they'll try to manage it quietly and pass it on to the next administration. So what do? They're still happily selling subordinate bonds, right? That's just sucking the blood out of ordinary people. The best way to address this would be to immediately disclose the size of Hozong Savings Bank's bad loans. But to do that, we'd have to verify the details of the loans, collateral, and recovery likelihood, which we have no authority to do. And it's unlikely that the supervisory authorities will step in either. I patted Taikyu's shoulder and said, "So we have to expose this ourselves."